If you've ever wondered how high a person can climb before the fall feels like flying, meet Ryan Rivera, the kind of New York rich that turns traffic lights into suggestions. On Instagram, he was perpetual summer, Hampton decks, borrowed yachts, champagne that cost more than a studio in Queens. In real life, he was ice-cold winter, gliding across Manhattan like sidewalks were marble made for him. On a Friday night in Midtown, the city purred beneath a glass-canopied Michelin spot, where waitlists were measured in favors. Ryan strolled in with his entourage, Maddie in a leather varsity jacket, Cole in a razor-cut suit, smelling like cardamom and money. The maitre d' clocked the Rivera name and snapped to attention. A corner banquette appeared as if the room itself moved aside. 2 bottles of Dom, the 2012, Ryan said, barely glancing at the menu. And send out whatever the chef brags about. He wore a navy suit that fit like it was born on him, a watch that could buy a decent pickup, and the kind of smile people confuse with kindness. The crew laughed loud, clinking flutes, trading stories about ski trips and half-finished startups. To Ryan, the restaurant's soft piano and low conversation were just soundtrack to his show. That was when he noticed the out-of-place note. An older man at a two-top near the window. His blazer had seen better years, cuffs frayed, collar a little tired. He ate slowly, meatloaf of all things at a place like this, savoring each bite like it mattered. He sat straight, napkin folded, hands careful and practiced, a dignity that didn't match the linen. "Check out Grandpa Thrift Store," Maddie snorted, probably saved up all month for this flex. Ryan let the cruelty bloom. "Month? Try the whole year." He rose, flute in hand, that easy swagger he'd learned in private schools and black cars. He drifted to the old man's table and paused as if weighing grace. Then he did a gentle, practiced stumble, the kind a lifetime of getaways teaches you, and the flute tipped. Champagne arced like a gold ribbon, exploding across the man's shirt. Gasps snapped through the room. The piano faltered. "Oh man," Ryan said, hand to his chest, voice sugared with fake concern. "I am so clumsy." The old man jolted up, cold bubbles running down his front, shock flushing his cheeks. His eyes weren't angry. They were something worse. Disappointed, like a teacher catching a cheat, like a father at a midnight door. "Here," Ryan added, peeling crisp hundreds from a money clip and fanning them onto the bread plate, green against white porcelain. "For dry cleaning. Maybe a shirt that doesn't have a backstory." Laughter crackled from the booth. A server froze, unsure whether to mop or disappear. The old man looked at the cash, then back at Ryan. No speech, no scene. He simply collected his coat, placed his napkin on the table with ceremony, and walked out into the January night, wet shirt clinging to a spine too proud to bend. Ryan returned to his table to applause. "You're evil," Cole grinned, "but like premium evil." "Relax," Ryan said, floating back into the cushions. "It's New York. It'll wash out." Across the room, near the bar, a man in a dark overcoat watched the door close behind the old gentleman. He had the posture of someone who made other men sit up straighter. His face was weathered money, handsome in the way power can be, and his jaw worked once, like swallowing glass. No one noticed him leave. Back at the booth, dessert arrived in towers. Ryan posted a story. Slow-motion sparks from a creme brulee torch. Maddie throwing up peace signs. The caption, "Fridays for winners." The likes ticked up. The world held. Outside, the wind cut down 53rd like it remembered a debt. A black sedan idled. The man in the overcoat opened the back door and sank into leather that smelled like old decisions. He didn't speak for a full block. When he did, it was to the driver. "Home?" Frank Rivera said softly. "Now." On the ride uptown, the city blurred into streaks of sodium. Frank unbuttoned the coat and folded it carefully on the seat, revealing a white dress shirt beneath, clean, pressed, and stained with a pale, expanding ring of champagne. He touched it once, as if confirming a nightmare you already know is true. He'd built Rivera Holdings out of warehouses and willpower, out of nights with no heat and days with no safety net. He'd promised himself his kid would never feel that fear. Somewhere along the way, the fear turned into something worse: entitlement. He had begged, lectured, threatened. Nothing stuck. Tonight wasn't a prank. It was a verdict. By the time the sedan slid into the private garage of a limestone tower on Park, the decision had set like concrete. Frank stepped into the mirrored elevator and watched his reflection. Silver hair, tired eyes, a stain that meant more than words, rise toward the penthouse he no longer wanted to occupy alone. Tomorrow, he would call his son to the top floor, to the office with the skyline view that made men feel invincible. Tomorrow, the boy would learn what gravity really was. And when he fell, Frank prayed he wouldn't break. Only finally, mercifully, land. The next morning broke clean and cold, the kind of Manhattan blue sky that makes even skyscrapers look scrubbed. Ryan woke in his Park Avenue Airy like always. Egyptian cotton, espresso machine humming, floor-to-ceiling views that turned the city into his screensaver. He showered in eucalyptus steam, chose a suit in sharkskin gray, and knotted a silk tie without looking. Last night's accident was already filed under funny stories. His phone buzzed. Frank's assistant, Jenna, her voice, usually honeyed, was steel. "Mr. Rivera requests you in his office immediately." "Tell him I'll swing by after breakfast," Ryan said, slipping on the watch. "Immediately," she repeated, and hung up. The Rivera Holdings elevator to the executive floor felt different today, like the air pressure had shifted. Jenna met him with a flat expression and ushered him into the corner office with the wraparound view, the river shining like a blade, the midtown spires, the tiny moving taxis that looked like toys. Frank wasn't behind his desk. He stood by the window, hands clasped. On a side table sat a silver tray. On the tray lay a white dress shirt, immaculately pressed, except for a pale, circular stain blooming at the chest. Ryan's smile flickered. "What's this? A dry cleaning intervention?" Frank turned. His face didn't carry anger. It carried judgment. "Do you recognize it?" "It's a shirt," Ryan said, aiming for breezy and landing on brittle. "You spilled champagne on me," Frank said quietly, "in a room full of people. You laughed. You paid me to go away." All the heat drained from Ryan's face. "That old guy, that was you? What kind of twisted—" "This isn't a game," Frank snapped, voice low and deadly. "It was a test, my last. I needed to see if there was anything left of the boy I raised, the one who knew what respect meant." Ryan forced a laugh that sounded like a cough. "It was a joke. My friends, it meant everything," Frank said. He exhaled, like a verdict leaving his lungs. "As of this minute, you're removed from every account, card, and credential tied to Rivera Holdings or my estate. Legally and financially, you are not my heir." Ryan blinked. "You can't be serious." A soft chime from the intercom. Jenna's voice. "Proceeding." Ryan's phone lit, then went black. He tried again. Nothing. On Frank's monitor, A cascade of confirmations rolled in. Corporate Amex canceled. Personal Black Card canceled. Checking and brokerage accounts frozen pending review. Car service revoked. Building access revoked beyond lobby. The penthouse? Ryan's voice cracked. You'll be escorted to collect personal clothing and toiletries, Frank said. Nothing of value leaves with you. The car is a company asset. You are not. Two security officers appeared in the doorway. Men Ryan had never really seen, though they'd opened hundreds of doors for him. Mr. Rivera, one said. Polite. Inevitable. Ryan looked at his father, scrambling for leverage that no longer existed. I'm your son. Frank's mouth trembled, then set. Being my son is a responsibility you abandoned. You haven't worked a day in your life. You've performed one. Please, Ryan said, a word he'd never needed. I can fix. You feel fear, Frank said, softer. Not remorse. Your education starts now. They didn't handcuff him. They didn't need to. The walk through the executive floor, past glass-walled conference rooms and framed magazine covers, took years. He felt eyes on him. Surprise, satisfaction, pity. The elevator down was a silent coffin. In the basement garage, his company Mercedes waited. Only this time he sat in the back seat like a passenger to his own undoing. The penthouse had already been invaded by a team in gloves. Jewelry cases closed, devices gone, art untouched because it was never his. A duffel bag rested by the closet. One guard nodded. 40 minutes. Ryan stuffed in bare essentials, jeans, t-shirts, a toothbrush, a pair of sneakers he'd never walked a mile in. He reached for the watch box and stopped himself. The second hand on the wall clock seemed louder than the HVAC. Back on the sidewalk, the wind was cruel and ordinary. The guards returned his duffel and a letter-sized envelope. From Mr. Rivera, one said. Then they turned and disappeared into the glass, leaving Ryan reflected and small. He tore the envelope open. Inside, nothing but a single business card embossed with Frank's name and a handwritten line beneath it. Survive. Ryan laughed once, a sound without humor. He pulled out his phone again by instinct. Dead. He found a payphone around the corner like a relic and fed it quarters from his pocket. Maddie answered on speaker, club noise blaring in the background. Yo, Prince! Maddie cackled. Heard you got cut off. Legendary bit. See you at Casa later? It's not a bit, Ryan said. I need a couch. Tonight. A beat. Then another voice. Call us when you stop playing. The line clicked. The dial tone was colder than the wind. Night fell fast. The city, which had always been his playground, sharpened into something with teeth. The suit itched. The duffel was heavy. He walked until the walking turned into wandering, until the lights blurred and the cold pierced through every expensive layer to skin that suddenly remembered it was human. He found a bench in Bryant Park and sat, hugging the bag, pretending it was temporary. The breath of the city rose in steam from grates. Somewhere, a siren howled. He stared at the buildings that once felt like home and now looked like locked doors. For the first time in his life, Ryan Rivera was truly alone. The first night chewed him up. Bryant Park turned from postcard to hunting ground after midnight, wind cutting like glass, footsteps that made him flinch, the hiss of steam rising from the grates like the city exhaling smoke. He curled around his duffel, suit wrinkling into something cheap, and learned the shape of fear. By dawn, he was shaking from cold and a kind of hunger he'd only ever talked about in abstract. Day 2 bled into day 3. He tried calling again from a bodega payphone, coins clinking like little apologies. Voicemail, a laugh, a hang-up. He traded the blazer for a stale bagel and a coffee that tasted like burnt batteries. He walked until he forgot why he was walking. Manhattan shrank around him, taller and meaner. Late the third afternoon, a man in a too-shiny suit found him sitting on a stoop off 8th Avenue, eyes webbed red. "Mr. Rivera?" the man asked, careful, like approaching a stray dog. Ryan stared. The man held out a craft envelope. "From your father." Inside, a key on a plain ring, a printed address in block letters, a single-page employment contract, and a short note in his father's hand. "I offered you a kingdom and you turned it into a circus. Now I'm offering you a chance. Not at your money, at your soul. 6 months. Work. Pay rent. Eat what you earn. If you stick it out, we talk. If you quit, consider me gone." The contract was for Quick Drop, a last-mile delivery arm of Rivera Logistics he'd barely known existed. Start time, 6 a.m., location, a warehouse in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. Pay, $16 an hour. No company car. A cargo bike. The address on the slip was a walk-up in Mott Haven, South Bronx. Apartment 3B. The 6 train groaned north, flickering lights reflecting his face back at him. Swollen eyes, grime at the collar, a jaw tight with something that might have been rage or resolve. The building on 138th Street had a front door that had stopped pretending to lock. 3 flights up, the key turned with a scraped protest. 3B was a box, peeling paint in tired colors, a bare bulb that hummed like a fly, a window that faced a brick wall 3 feet away, a thin mattress on the floor, a dorm room fridge buzzing like it had a fever, a bathroom the size of a coat closet with a shower that coughed only cold. A roach skittered like punctuation across the baseboard. Ryan set the duffel down and sat on the mattress. Dust poofed. For the first time, it hit him, not like a slap, but like gravity, that there would be no reset button. No brunch table to tell this as a wild story. This wasn't a plot twist. This was the plot. The alarm he set on a drugstore burner phone screamed him awake at 4:45. He pulled on jeans and a hoodie, laced up sneakers he'd never scuffed, and hit the subway while the city yawned. Sunset Park still smelled of last night's rain. The Quick Drop building squatted under the BQE, bay doors open, forklifts chirping, belts carrying brown boxes like a river. A supervisor with forearms like bridge cables and a name patch that read, "Ramirez," didn't bother with a handshake. He tossed Ryan a high-vis vest and pointed with his chin. "Locker, uniform, bikes out back. You scan, you deliver, you don't break anything. 3 strikes and you're gone. You late, that's a strike. You mouth off, that's a strike." His eyes flicked over the expensive bone structure, the soft hands. "You figure it out?" "Yes," Ryan said, because anything else would be another kind of no. The cargo bike looked like a metal animal, front box scarred with stickers, brakes squeaking protest. A dispatcher slapped a battered scanner into his palm and loaded the route. Bay Ridge, Greenwood Heights, up and back. "On time is God," she said. "Call if you get hit by a bus, otherwise don't call." The city reintroduced itself from ground level. Brooklyn streets tilted and bucked. Wind knifed off the harbor. His thighs screamed by the third hill. His hands blistered through the first gloves he'd ever needed, and the world stopped being a panorama and became nothing but intersections, potholes, impatient horns, names on doorbells. People met him at stoops, bleary and skeptical, signed with grunts, shut doors in his face for being 1 minute late. A dog lunged. A teenager filmed him wheezing past and laughed. At lunch, he sat on a curb, inhaled a bodega turkey sandwich and a banana, and counted the cash left for rent that would be due in 2 weeks. Numbers that used to be trivial now had weight. He taped a torn box, apologized to a woman in a bathrobe, and meant it. By 5 p.m., he was an ache wearing a vest. Back in the warehouse, Ramirez gave a grunt that might have been approval. "Didn't die," he said. "See you at 6. On the train home, he cradled his hands, skin raw and swollen, and stared at the grime under his nails like they belonged to someone else. Outside 3B, the hallway smelled like bleach and fried onions. Through thin walls, he heard a couple arguing in Spanish, a baby start and stop crying, a TV preacher promising a miracle. The shower spat a mean thread of cold. He stood under it until numb was better than pain. He ate instant ramen straight from the pot, the steam fogging the one window. He lay on the mattress and listened to the neighborhood breathing. On the cracked ceiling, the shadows of car lights brushed past like ghosts. He thought of Frank's note. 6 months. Not a sentence, more like a map with one road. He had 2 choices, run or ride. The alarm would answer for him in 90 minutes worth of sleep. By day 3, the blisters on Ryan's palms had split into little mouths that complained every time he gripped the handlebars. He wrapped them in drugstore gauze and duct tape, then learned the careful art of not bleeding on cardboard. Brooklyn taught him its private vocabulary. How to time a light on 4th Avenue. How a double-parked truck can stall an entire block. How a gust off Gowanus can tilt your bike like a bad thought. What stung more than the wind were the faces. To most people, he was a vest and a beeping scanner. "You're late." "Wrong door." "Don't lean that there." A guy in slippers closed the door mid-thank you, the latch clipping off his words. A woman filmed him from her stoop, posted a story with the caption, "Dude dying delivering my vitamins." 4 laughing emojis. He would have laughed once, too. Now the sound sat like a pebble in his shoe. He learned shortcuts from the other riders during 5-minute gulps of air by the bay doors. Luis from Sunset Park, with calves like cables. Tasha, who could snake a cargo bike through a mess of school buses without touching a brake. "Keep your head on a swivel," she said, pointing at his still too clean helmet. "And don't make eye contact with drivers. They take it as consent to hit you." Nights in 3B, the building ran its own orchestra. An infant's sawtooth wail, a blender, the heavy stomp of someone's boots 2 floors up, a corridor argument that boiled and cooled in Spanish and then laughter. He ate cheap, rice and beans, a couple eggs, sometimes a chopped cheese from the bodega when he felt brave with his wallet. The shower never warmed. The window never shut quite right. And yet there was a rhythm in the smallness. He started leaving his shoes by the door like everyone else, started nodding to the super, started to recognize the cough of the elevator even though it never stopped on his floor. He met her on a Tuesday at 10:14 p.m., back pressed to the cool hallway wall because the mattress felt like it was swallowing him whole. The door to 3C opened and light spilled across the scuffed linoleum. She stepped out wearing navy scrubs and white sneakers gone gray at the toe, hair twisted into a bun that had lost the fight hours ago. "You look like roadkill," she said, not unkindly. Ryan blinked. "Thanks?" She tipped her chin. "Night shift. ER at Lincoln. I know the roadkill face." She hesitated, then stuck out a hand. "I'm Isabel. Everyone calls me Iz, 3C. He considered his bandaged palms, offered a forearm instead. "Ryan, 3B. His voice sounded like crushed gravel. Iz looked him over with the quick scan of a clinician. "You eating?" Technically. That a yes? That's a macaroni from a cup. Gross, she said, and disappeared back inside. A beat later, she returned with a plastic container releasing a curl of steam. Chicken noodle, real chicken, the kind that saw daylight. I can't. Pride rose up out of pure reflex, the last luxury he hadn't pawned. You can, she said, already setting it in his hands. And you will. Consider it neighbor tax. The first spoonful went down and lit a small fire in him. Salt, thyme, the softness of egg noodles, the generosity of it. He ate standing in the hall like a teenager between classes, trying not to let his eyes close. Courier? She asked, leaning on her door frame. Quick drop? She nodded like that explained the bandages. You'll want better tape, and gloves that fit. Come by tomorrow. I'll fix those hands before they get infected. The old version of him would have made a joke, turned kindness into a transaction, flirted because it cost nothing to be careless. The new version just said thank you and meant it. She squinted. You from here? Midtown, he said, then realized how that sounded. Sort of, used to be. Everybody used to be from somewhere, Iz said. South Bronx makes you earn it. Her phone buzzed. She glanced down, grimaced. Back to the circus. Try to sleep. Soup's better warm, but it'll still work cold. He handed back the empty container like a relic. I'll wash. Please don't, she said, laughing. Our water's 90% lead and regrets. She slid the container from his hands. Good night, 3B. Good night, 3C. After she closed the door, Ryan stood there, surprised by the ache in his chest that wasn't fatigue. Invisibility had been a kind of armor. Being seen, even for 5 minutes in a dim hallway, felt like someone opening a window he hadn't known was painted shut. The next morning, she was true to her word. She sat him at her tiny kitchen table under a hanging pothos and wrapped his torn skin with real tape, clean gauze, antibiotic ointment applied with hands that were all business and a little gentle anyway. Her apartment smelled like coffee and eucalyptus. On the fridge were Polaroids of co-workers, a kid in a graduation cap, a flyer for a community clinic day. You put some kind of cream on these? She asked. Neosporin. Good. Keep doing that, and stop squeezing the brakes like they owe you money. He almost smiled. Any other orders, Doc? Don't call me Doc, she said. Nurses run the world and the floor. Doctors just sign things. She finished and sat back. There. Try to keep them clean. I don't need you bringing me sepsis on my shift. He left feeling steadier than the caffeine warranted. The hills were the same, the drivers were the same, the scanner still nagged, but something in him had moved a centimeter closer to human. That night, someone knocked on his door. Not the police knuckle knock of trouble. A polite rap. He opened to find an elderly woman with a silver braid and a floral housecoat, a plastic grocery bag looped over one wrist. You're 3B, she said. I'm Miss Connie from 4A. You got the long legs for stairs. I need, if it's not too much, milk upstairs. My knees are stubborn. Of course, Ryan said, taking the bag. 4 flights later, he set it on her counter, dodging a cat and a jungle of spider plants. Miss Connie pressed a can of black beans into his hands in thanks, like he'd delivered her a piano. Welcome to the building, baby, she said, patting his arm. We look out for each other here. Back in 3B, he cooked the beans with cumin and onion and thought about how the city had started talking back to him in small ways. Not mercy, just ordinary interdependence. It stripped the sheen off things and left something sturdier. At 4:45, the alarm sang again. He reached for the bike gloves the way a different man once reached for cufflinks, and laughed quietly at himself. 6 months was still a mountain, but somewhere between a bowl of soup and a grocery bag, the climb had stopped being only punishment. Tomorrow there would be rain, and with it, a test that would change how the building said his name. The forecast said, showers. The sky said, don't be stupid. By late afternoon, the Bronx had turned the color of a bruise, and the wind began bossing people around. Ryan stuffed his phone in a sandwich bag, taped his sleeves, and tried to beat the worst of it. He almost made it. At 7:12 p.m., thunder cracked so close the building shivered. Rain came down in sheets so thick the hallway windows blurred. Somewhere, a car alarm decided the world was ending and screamed along. He'd just kicked off his soaked sneakers when the yelling started. Panic, not angry. From 3D. The door was open, light spilling into the hall like a flare. Iz stepped out of 3C at the same time he did, already in triage mode, ponytail dark with rain. You hear that? They ran. Inside 3D, Jay and Maria were wide-eyed with terror. Their little boy, Leo, maybe 5, Star Wars pajamas, sat propped on pillows, chest rising and falling in quick, shallow seesaws. Every inhale whistled. Every exhale sounded like a fight. Asthma, Iz said, voice razor steady. How long? Started an hour ago, Maria said, wringing her hands. We called 911. Storms got them backed up. Where's his nebulizer? Iz asked. It broke last week, Jay said, shame flooding his face. I was going to pick one up Friday. Iz was already checking Leo's pulse ox with a clip from her pocket. He needs albuterol now. Ryan felt the room tilt. The old him would have looked for a checkbook. The newer him looked for a way through the rain. Closest 24-hour pharmacy? He asked. CVS on 149th, Iz said without looking up. Across from the hub, but they won't hand meds without a script. Machine and mask they will, Ryan said, thinking of the shelves. And albuterol over the counter in neb vials if you know what to ask for. Iz met his eyes, surprise and hope colliding. You can get there? He was already moving. In 3B, he ripped open the metal box under his mattress, wads of wrinkled bills, every spare dollar he'd hoarded for soft landings. He scooped it all into his pocket, jacket, helmet. He caught his reflection in the cracked mirror. Not a prince, not a courier, just a man trying. The storm grabbed him the second he pushed outside. Rain stung like gravel. Streets were small brown rivers. He stepped over a floating pizza box and shouldered the quick-drop bike into the current. Every block was a dare. He threaded buses, dodged a traffic cone skating across the asphalt, and learned which puddles were potholes the hard way. On 3rd Avenue, a cab threw a wave over him so big he laughed and pedaled harder. When the chain skipped, he talked to it like a horse. Come on, buddy, 1 more mile. The CVS lights glowed like a chapel. He shoved the bike inside the automatic doors, dripping onto the tile. The night pharmacist looked up, unimpressed. You can't bring that in here. Kid upstairs can't breathe, Ryan said, breathless. I need a nebulizer, pediatric mask, tubing, an albuterol nebulase. I'll pay cash. The man stared 1 beat, then turned without a word and began pulling boxes. Brand or generic? Generic. Mask size? Small. He's 5. The total made his stomach dip. He emptied his pocket on the counter. Damp bills, stray quarters, every plan he'd made for himself. The drawer slammed. He was moving again. The ride back felt longer. His legs burned, his hands even bandaged, screamed. A garbage can lid shot past like a UFO. He leaned into the wind and pictured Leo's tiny chest and the way Maria had said please to the air. 4 flights up on adrenaline alone. Iz had cleared the coffee table, laid out a towel, turned a 3D living room into a clinic. She tore into the box while he cut open the neb vials with his teeth. Mask, tubing, compressor, click. The little engine hummed. The mist began to ghost the inside of the plastic. "Hey, buddy," Iz said, crouching to Leo's eye level. "This is a superhero mask, okay? Breathes for you until yours catches up." Leo nodded, eyes huge. The first lungful rattled, then some miracle of chemistry and persistence began to work. The whistle softened. The seesaw slowed. His fingers unclenched. Maria started crying in silent relief. Jay pressed both hands to his face and said thank you to no one in particular and everyone at once. Ryan backed toward the door, suddenly shy. He didn't want payment, didn't want a speech. He wanted air, cold and private. Iz caught his wrist gently. "You good?" He realized he was shaking, soaked through, money gone, heart hammering like it had ridden with him. He nodded. Outside, the hall smelled like wet coats and Lysol. He leaned against the wall and let the storm's roar fill his ears. The box in his pocket was empty, and yet he felt full. A soft knock. Iz again. Hair frizzed from steam, eyes bright and tired. "He's stable. Ambulance finally called to say they're an hour out, so I told them never mind." "Good," he said, voice rough. She looked at him for a long second. "That was insane." "Yeah." "And heroic." He tried to wave it off. She didn't let him. "Don't. Take the win." Behind her, Jay stepped into the doorway with a Tupperware of arroz con pollo, still warm. "For you, man. Please." Ryan took it with both hands like something fragile. "Thanks." Back in 3B, he ate sitting on the floor, rain drumming the window like fingers on a table. The food tasted like someone else's kitchen on a Sunday, like being included. He thought of the money he'd spent and felt no grief for it, only a strange lightness, as if a stone he'd been hauling had quietly rolled off somewhere between 3rd and 149th. His phone, miraculously still alive, buzzed with a text from an unknown number. A photo. Leo, thumbs up behind a foggy mask. Under it, from Maria, "Gracias." Then another from Iz. "You changed a life tonight, 3B. Try to sleep." He did, eventually, with the storm still shouting outside and the building answering with its own steady chorus. In the morning, everyone would know what happened. Buildings are gossip machines. And Ryan's name would carry a new note when people said it. He had no savings now, but he had something else. Something he couldn't have bought when he was rich. And in a glass office far away, a father was about to decide the next move in a game his son didn't know was still being played. By morning, the storm had wrung itself dry, leaving the Bronx scrubbed and oddly tender. Word sprinted faster than the elevators. The guy in 3B biked through a monsoon to save the kid in 3D. Doors that had been indifferent now cracked open when Ryan passed. Heads nodded. A little boy on the 2nd floor saluted him with a plastic lightsaber. It embarrassed him and warmed him in the same breath. At Quick Drop, Ramiro tossed him a fresh route and, miracle, half a smile. "Heard you turned into Aquaman last night, Carter." "It was a one-night gig," Ryan said, strapping on his helmet. Still, the streets felt different under his tires, like the city had shifted an inch and now fit him better. He rode tighter lines, knew which manhole covers would bite, when to sneak past delivery trucks before they yawned open. His hands, once soft, had turned into tools. The ache in his legs felt like proof. Nights were another education. Ms. Connie from 4A, tiny lace curtains, plastic on the sofa, had become Sunday family. He'd fix a leaky faucet or change a bulb she couldn't reach. She'd hand him iced tea and stories from a queen's childhood, where everyone left their doors open and you knew the butcher's kids by name. "The heart's like a houseplant," she told him once, patting his calloused knuckles. "You water it with what you do, not with what you say." He thought about that when he saw Jay in the stairwell scrubbing out a stroller tire. "How's Leo?" "Sleeping like a champ," Jay said, grinning. "Doctor at the clinic said whoever got that NEB saved his lungs a lot of work." Jay's face softened. "We owe you." "You don't," Ryan said. "You'll pay it forward." And Jay actually nodded like that made sense. He and Iz slid into a rhythm that had nothing to do with titles. They ate on her kitchen floor more nights than not, trading war stories. Her from the ER, him from the street. He learned to say, "Tonight sucked," without dressing it up. She learned to lean her head on his shoulder for a minute and call that medicine. If he lingered too long when handing her a dish, if her fingers stayed around his wrist a heartbeat extra, neither of them named it. One Saturday, they walked to St. Mary's Park and sat on a sun-hot bench. A rec league softball game thudded in the distance. A kid learned to ride a bike while his mom jogged alongside yelling, "You got it!" The ordinary American soundtrack. "I wasn't always this guy," Ryan said finally, eyes on the cracked diamond. He laid it out without brands or headlines, just the shape of arrogance, the weight of money that made everyone else look like scenery, the way contempt becomes a habit. He told her he'd hurt people and didn't even notice. He told her about the night in a restaurant when he proved to the worst version of himself that he was real. Iz didn't interrupt. When he ran out of words, she laced their fingers. "I don't know who you were," she said, simple as a pledge. "I know who shows up now." That night, back in 3B, he stared at the ceiling crack that looked like Florida and felt something shift. The anger at his father had cooled from a wildfire to coals. In the glow, he could see the outline of a truth he didn't want to admit. Maybe the fall had been a rescue deployed from 30 stories up. Across the river, in a midtown glass box with carpets that swallowed noise, a different conversation unfolded. His father stood at the window, gray at the temples, a report open on his desk. Timestamps, pay stubs, a grainy photo of a courier carrying a pharmacy bag through standing rain. Opposite him sat Stephen Montgomery, an old friend whose empire had been turned, almost perversely, into public good. "You were right," his father said, voice rough at the edges. "He's changing." Stephen tapped a folder labeled New Dawn. "Good. Then let's stop aiming to fix him and give him something bigger than himself." He unfolded plans, modest apartments arranged around gardens, maker spaces with tool benches, a clinic with sunlight and real privacy, classrooms that didn't feel like punishment. Housing, job training, wraparound care, re-entry for folks done with Rikers, beds for people sleeping on the Q train, childcare that lets parents breathe, not charity, work with dignity, a neighborhood that heals its own. His father's jaw worked. "You want him to run it." "I want him to embody it," Stephen said. "He knows the pavement now. He knows what it costs to be invisible. Put real resources behind him, guardrails where he doesn't know what he doesn't know, and let him lead." Silence filled with humming, HVAC, and a siren far below. Finally, his father nodded, a decision landing. "When he finishes the 6 months, We don't hand him a penthouse. We hand him a purpose. Back on 138th, the building was its usual Greek chorus. TVs through open doors, someone practicing trumpet, the elevator deciding whether it felt generous. In the stairwell, Iz stopped on the landing between floors, sunlight striping her face. She kissed him, not like a question or a dare, but like agreement. It wasn't fireworks. It was a key turning in a door. The storm had passed. The air felt rinsed. Somewhere in Midtown, two men were sketching a blueprint that could change thousands of lives. Somewhere in the Bronx, a man who had fallen from very high was discovering the ground could be holy. The calendar pages kept ripping off, quietly. The end of his 6 months was walking toward him like a date he couldn't move. When it arrived, would Ryan choose comfort or calling? The last week ticked by like a countdown clock no one else could hear. Ryan still ran routes, still shouldered boxes up fifth-floor walk-ups, still learned which bodega had the good empanadas under the heat lamp at 2 p.m. But everything felt edged. Every familiar corner, the mural of the Yankees logo on 149th, the lady who watered her tomatoes in 5-gallon buckets, looked like a place he might be seeing for the last time. He didn't tell Iz about the date. He tried twice, and the words stuck. She knew anyway. "You've got storm eyes," she said, tying her scrubs at the waist before a night shift. "Whatever's coming, we'll handle it." She kissed his forehead, then the place at his jaw where worry gathered. "Go be fast and safe." The building had turned into a village. Kids yelled, "Speedy," when he locked up his bike. Mrs. Connie saved him a slice of lemon pound cake and nagged him to use coasters. Jay dragged him to a Saturday community cleanup and handed him a trash grabber like a scepter. Ryan looked around at the busted sidewalk, the rake in his hands, the way everyone moved in practiced choreography, and thought, "I belong here." That thought terrified him more than losing anything had before. On the 6th-month day, Ramiro gave him the same deadpan look and a new route. "You good?" "Yeah," Ryan lied. He rode harder than he needed, shaving minutes, careful and reckless at once. He took a second to pet the pit bull behind the deli that only liked him. He fixed a loose cartwheel for a woman outside the pharmacy without thinking. By dusk, his thighs were cooked, his shirt stuck to his back, his scanner full of signatures. He dropped the bike at the dock and unstrapped his helmet like a guy delaying the last page of a book. "Carter." Ramiro's voice came from behind a pallet of boxes. "You're wanted upstairs." The words dropped through him. "Now?" "Now," Ramiro said. After a beat, he added softer, "Good work today." A black sedan idled at the curb outside the warehouse like an exhale. No driver in a cap, no pomp, just doors that unlocked with a click. The ride into Midtown erased months in minutes. The FDR glittering, the Williamsburg Bridge, the skyline shouldering up like it owned the horizon. By the time the car slid to a stop in front of Carter Holdings, his last name 30 feet tall in brushed steel, his stomach was a fist. Security badges opened without question. The elevator whispered him to the top. The carpet up there still swallowed sound. The glass still made the city look like a scale model. His father stood at the window, hands in his pockets, broad shoulders a little more stooped than Ryan remembered. No tie today. Gray threading through dark hair. The man looked human, which made this worse. They didn't speak for a long beat. The air moved around the hum of HVAC and a siren far below. "You're on time," his father said at last. "I learned punctuality pays by the hour," Ryan said. It sounded like a joke and wasn't. His father motioned to the credenza. A single sheet lay there. A final pay stub from Quick Drop with his name, his hours, the break deductions, the net pay. Proof, in bureaucratic font, that he had survived. "You met the terms," his father said. "No theatrics, no grand reveal. The test is over." Ryan braced for a pen, a non-disclosure, a speech. None came. Instead, his father looked at him like a doctor about to deliver a diagnosis and a second chance. "I need to ask you something without all this." He gestured vaguely at the whole empire. "What kind of man do you want to be, Ryan?" The question landed like a clean hit. Months unspooled behind Ryan's eyes. The wet weight of a pharmacy bag in a storm. Miss Connie's papery hand in his. Iz's laugh when he missed a step carrying groceries. The way a kid's chest rises easier when a nebulizer hums. The version of himself who'd measured days in bottle service and likes was a ghost. He thought of the restaurant. He didn't look away from it this time. "That guy's dead," he said, voice steady. "I don't want the clothes or the cars or the room with a view. I want a life that means something when you put your head down at night. I want to be a man Iz can trust. I want to be useful." His father's mouth opened, shut. Wet shone in his eyes he didn't bother to hide. He came around the desk like the furniture had been a barricade and wrapped his arms around his son. It was graceless and strong and over too fast. They both stepped back, both a little startled at how much it mattered. "I'm proud of you," his father said, rough. "More than I've ever been of any deal I closed." He pressed a button on the intercom. "Stephen, come in." The door clicked. A man Ryan vaguely remembered from headline photos and black tie galas walked in. Tall, calm, silver hair that looked earned, not bought. He held a folder with a tab that read New Dawn. "Ryan," he said, shaking his hand like equals. "I've been waiting to meet the man I've been reading about." Ryan glanced between them. "What is this?" His father's face settled into something like relief. "Not a return to what you had," he said. "An invitation to build something we don't." Stephen set the folder on the desk and flipped it open. Renderings fanned out. Brick and glass around a green courtyard. A clinic with windows. Workshops lined with tool benches. A preschool with a splash of color. It looked nothing like a charity gala, and everything like a place where days could be fixed. "Before we talk terms," Stephen said, "we should talk about why." Ryan leaned in despite himself, the edges of his old life crumbling like stale bread behind him. "Why what?" he asked. "Why you?" Stephen said. And then he slid the plans across the desk. If Chapter 7 was the knock at the door, this was the hinge swinging open. Stephen Monroe, calm as a Sunday morning host, spread the papers like a card dealer who already knew the winning hand. "New Dawn," he said. "Not a foundation with gala photos, a working neighborhood, housing that's dignified, a clinic that keeps folks out of the ER, workshops that pay real wages, childcare that lets parents breathe, not charity, infrastructure for second chances." Ryan skimmed a rendering. A brick courtyard with raised garden beds, a makerspace with sawdust floating in shafts of light, a storefront with a hand-painted sign that read, New Dawn Market. It didn't look glossy. It looked alive. Stephen nodded toward Richard Carter. "Your dad's been writing checks for years, and it's like pouring water into a colander. This is different. It needs a leader who speaks both languages, boardroom and block. Someone who's eaten at the steakhouse and the $5 bodega counter and can tell the truth in both rooms. We think that's you." Ryan barked out a small, humorless laugh. "I'm a delivery guy." "Exactly," Stephen said. You've been invisible and you've been untouchable. You know what a locked lobby feels like on both sides. Richard leaned his forearms on the desk. The last time Ryan had seen him so earnest, he'd been teaching him how to throw a four-seam fastball in the backyard. Everything I took from you is in a trust, he said quietly. It grew. We seed New Dawn with that, every dollar. Your inheritance becomes a launch pad, not a life raft. Ryan stared at the plans, then at the skyline beyond the glass. The old reflex, the part of him that did ROI math for sport, kicked on, then fizzled. Another voice was louder now. Miss Connie's rasp, Iz's warm certainty, the sound of a nebulizer hum finding a kid's rhythm. He swallowed. What would I be? He asked. The heart, Stephen said. We'll hire the best builders, the sharpest program directors. A CFO who could run a hospital. You set the compass. You make sure this place never forgets why it exists. Silence settled like dust after a demolition. Ryan felt the room tilt toward an answer he hadn't planned to give. He could hear Iz asking the simplest question. Does it help? He lifted his chin. I'll do it, he said. Richard exhaled like he'd been holding his breath since January. On two conditions. Stephen's eyebrows hopped. Let's hear 'em. First, Ryan said, steady now. We don't break ground in Midtown or some waterfront photo op. We start in Mott Haven, my block. The one that took me in when I had nothing worth taking. Richard didn't hesitate. Done! Second, Ryan said, voice softening. I don't do this without Iz. She's an ER nurse. She's the smartest, toughest person I know. The clinic reports to her. She's not a token. She's my partner. Stephen smiled. If she says yes, she's in. Titles, budget, staff. We build the clinic around her standards. Ryan nodded, relief and terror braided together. Then I need to go home, he said, surprising himself with the word. I have to tell her everything. Richard stood. For a heartbeat, father and son were just two men in a quiet office with a city at their feet and a future on the table. Take the car, he said. Or don't. Just come back when you're ready. And Ryan, thank you. Ryan shook Stephen's hand, then his father's. He didn't take the sedan. He hit the revolving door and let Manhattan noise wash over him like surf. Horns, a food truck generator, a busker playing Springsteen on a battered Strat. He walked south, past suits clutching cold brew and tourists staring up. Past the shop windows that had once felt like mirrors. He wasn't tempted. He wanted concrete under his feet and paint on his jeans. By the time he climbed the familiar stairwell that always smelled faintly like pine sol and frying onions, the sunset had thrown a gold stripe across the third-floor landing. He knocked on 3C. Iz opened in leggings and a Knicks tee, hair twisted on top of her head, eyes scanning his face in one practiced triage sweep. Hey, Speedy, she said. You look like you just ran a marathon in a thunderstorm. Close, he said, breath catching. Can we talk? They sat at her tiny table. He told her everything. His last name in lights, the restaurant, the fall, the 6 months with rules like barbed wire, the investigation he hadn't known about, the question his father had asked, the answer he'd given. He told her about New Dawn, about Mott Haven, about needing her not as decoration but as compass. He didn't pretty it up. He didn't skip the worst parts. When he finished, the kitchen was quiet except for the radiator ticking as it cooled. Iz kept her hands flat on the table like she was feeling for tremors. So, she said finally, one corner of her mouth quirking. You're secretly old money, and your dad cosplayed as a jerk at a steakhouse to save your soul. Ryan winced. Yeah. And now he and Mr. Silver Fox want you to run a small city. She studied him. And you want me to run the clinic. I don't want to do it without you, he said. And I want to do it here, with our neighbors setting the rules with us, not being served by us. Iz leaned back, eyes on him like she was reading an EKG. The hurt in there, the betrayal by omission, flickered, then steadied into something else. I fell for a delivery guy who shows up, she said, voice low. Not for a last name. The delivery guy still in there? He nodded. Then I'm in, she said. On my conditions. He laughed, half gasp, half relief. Name them. No ribbon cuttings on a weekday morning while folks are at work. We hire from the block first. We measure success in ER visits avoided, not press hits. And I get to veto any lobby art that looks like a hotel. Deal, he said, grinning. She squeezed his hand. Then tomorrow we start with Ms. Connie and Jay and the bodega guy and the moms who keep this building running. If it's for them, it's with them. Outside, sirens Dopplered past and a baby cried, and someone on the corner argued about the Knicks draft picks. Inside, the plans on Iz's table looked less like drawings and more like a map. Ryan looked at her and felt the click of a key turning in the right lock. He'd chosen. Now he had to earn it. Ready to build something real? He asked. Iz smiled, bright and dangerous. Ask me again when the first landlord tries to triple a rent because we made the block nice. Ryan swallowed, the next fight already forming on the horizon. Then we start tonight, he said. With whom? And what first? Word travels fast in a building where everyone shares walls. By lunchtime the next day, the rumor had grown legs. The delivery guy from 3B was secretly a carter, and he wanted to pour big money into the block. Half the neighborhood heard investment and translated it to eviction. By sundown, the Mott Haven Community School gym smelled like floor wax, pepperoni slices, and suspicion. Folding chairs scraped, moms with strollers parked along the baseline, old heads leaned on canes and memory. Manny from the bodega set up a coffee urn next to a tray of supermarket cookies. A hand-lettered sign, Town Hall, hung crooked above the stage. No podium, just a mic on a stand that squealed every time someone breathed on it. Iz went first. She wore scrubs and sneakers, and her stethoscope still slung around her neck like proof of life. I'm Isabella Martinez, she said, voice steady into the mic. You know me as Iz, ER nurse, apartment 3C. I asked you here because there's an idea on the table that could help us breathe easier, literally. A clinic, real housing, jobs you can live on, built here for us. A wave of side eyes. A guy in a Yankees cap shouted, For how long? Until the rents triple? Murmurs of, yeah, exactly. Fair, Iz said. That's why we're listening first. This doesn't work unless it works for the people already here. She looked to Ryan. He stood, palms damp, collar suddenly too tight. He'd rehearsed lines in his head walking over, but the gym, the faces, knocked them clean out. My name is Ryan, he said. Most of you know me as Speedy. I've run your packages up 4 flights, buzzed until you threw me a look, and promised I'd find your missing meds because the system ate the barcode. A chuckle or two. Someone nodded. I've also not been who you thought I was. He exhaled. My last name is Carter. My dad owns Carter Capital. 6 months ago, I was a mess with a trust fund. Then I lost it all. I slept on a bench. I moved into 3B. I delivered your boxes. I met you. You taught me how to show up. Silence thickened. A woman in the 3rd row crossed her arms tighter. So you're a millionaire who wants to help. We've seen that movie. Yeah, he said. Me too. That's not this. We're not dropping in and slapping a logo on your problems. We're building something we answer to. You. A clinic runs. Apartments with fair leases. Workshops where you get paid to learn. Childcare so you can take a second shift without praying your neighbors free. And we put it under a non-profit with a board that includes people from this block. Paper promises, someone muttered. Ryan swallowed. I get it. If I were you, I wouldn't trust me either. So judge me on what you've seen. When Leo stopped breathing in the storm, I didn't ask for a tax receipt. I biked to the all-night pharmacy and emptied my stash to buy a nebulizer. Not because I'm a hero, because not helping felt impossible. Heads turned toward the back where Jay stood, one hand on Leo's shoulder. Jay raised his chin. That's facts, he said. Y'all know me. I don't cape for suits. But that night, he saved my boy. Miss Connie pushed herself up, tiny but somehow taller than the mic. This young man carried a fan up 4 flights on a 95-degree day because I couldn't breathe, she said, voice papery and sharp. I ain't impressed by cars. I'm impressed by who shows up with a socket wrench when my sink leaks. The gym shifted, arms uncrossed. The Yankees cap guy still looked skeptical, but his jaw unclenched. A landlord at the aisle hissed, "What about property values? You going to decide who moves in?" Iz stepped back to the mic. We're not the city. We're not the cops. We're your neighbors. We're setting up a tenant's legal clinic on day 1. We'll publish every contract online. And if anyone's trying to get rich off New Dawn by pushing people out, they'll have to do it with their name on a paper we all can read. Manny lifted his cup. What do you need from us? Everything, Ryan said, and meant it. Advisory council seats, volunteers to help pick contractors, parents to tell us what hours childcare actually has to be open, teens to tell us which jobs sound like a trap and which sound like a future, and, this is key, permission to try and permission to get it wrong and fix it fast. An older woman in a Mets jacket shouted, "What's the catch?" The catch is we don't do it without you, Iz said, and you hold us accountable. A PTA mom grabbed the mic with practiced elbows. Put it to a vote, she said. Not legally binding, whatever. But if this is with us, let us say yes or no. Hands shot up, voices overlapping. Someone dragged out an old cardboard box, ripped paper into slips. Manny found a Sharpie. The gym turned into a church fish fry, chaotic, warm, wary, alive. 10 minutes later, the PTA mom counted at the scorer's table while the scoreboard glowed orca, like it was waiting on them to start the season. She looked up, eyes damp. 86 in favor, 23 against, 2 abstain. She wiped her cheek, embarrassed. We'll hold you to it. We expect you to, Ryan said, throat thick. The gym cracked open. Applause, a few whoops, a few muttered, "We'll see." The kind of sound that means a door didn't just open, a hinge got oiled. Afterward, Iz and Ryan sat on the edge of the stage with paper plates balanced on their knees, pizza grease spotting the blue paint. Jay slapped Ryan's shoulder. Ms. Connie pressed a butterscotch into his palm like talisman and tax. First win, Iz whispered. First brick, he said. The school custodian flicked the lights, a not-so-subtle hint. People spilled out to the sidewalk under the street lamps, still talking, already arguing about priorities like they were picking a lineup. Across the street, an engine purred, low, expensive, familiar. Headlights washed over the gym doors. A cherry-red sports car idled at the curb, window sliding down to reveal a smile Ryan knew too well. Well, well, said the man behind the wheel. "If it isn't Ryan Carter playing community organizer. Thought you'd be dead or in Ibiza." Iz felt his shoulder tense under her hand. "Friend of yours?" she asked. "Used to be," Ryan said, eyes narrowing as the past rolled up in leather and chrome. The light turned green. The car didn't move. "Ready for round two?" Iz murmured. Ryan stood. "Yeah," he said. "Let's see what the old world wants." Hook first. When the past shows up with a V12 and a smirk, you find out if your spine is real or rented. The red Ferrari idled at the curb, purring like it owned the block. Behind the wheel sat Matt Pierce, country club tan, wrist weighted with a watch that could buy 3 Hondas. He'd been Ryan's shadow back when their idea of charity was bidding on courtside seats for the kids and never meeting a single kid. "Ryan Carter," Matt sang, dragging the syllables. "Heard rumors, figured they were rehab gossip. And here you are, parent-teacher night with pizza grease on your jeans." "Town hall," Ryan said. "And it's pepperoni. You want a slice, or you just here to rev your midlife crisis at a school?" Matt laughed too loud. His eyes slid to Iz. "And you must be the muse. Nurse? Yoga instructor? Either way, respect. He's got taste." Iz didn't flinch. "ER nurse," she said. "Mott Haven. We do trauma, which is good because your vibe is bleeding." A few parents snorted. Matt's smile thinned. "So this is the play?" Matt leaned his elbow on the window. "Daddy cuts you off? You come downtown to cosplay Robin Hood?" "Bro, if you wanted a project, we could have bought a soccer team." "Different kind of project," Ryan said. Matt's gaze flicked over the school, the cracked sidewalk, the bodega glow. "Let me guess, nonprofit, advisory board, community-led. You don't build wealth here? You build lawsuits? Come back to the city?" "We've got 2 hedge funds circling Miami Tech. Your name still opens doors." "Then close them," Ryan said. "We're opening others." Matt chuckled, then went for the soft spot. "You gonna tell her how you got here? Or keep riding the aw shucks, I deliver boxes now thing? The gala circuit misses you, man, and I promise you, this neighborhood will chew you up and sell the bricks." Ryan stepped closer, the street lamp carving hard lines on his face. "You don't get to talk about this block like it's furniture." Matt's smirk twitched. "And you don't get to decide who I talk to." He tipped his chin at Iz. "When you get bored of playing Florence Nightingale to the prodigal son." Ryan's jaw clicked. Iz touched his wrist. "I've stitched worse mouths," she said lightly. "Drive safe. School zone." A horn blared behind the Ferrari. Matt rolled the window up, then back down. "Last chance, Rye. Drinks at Aurelia at 10. We'll toast to your little bake sale." "Enjoy your martini," Ryan said. "We've got blueprints." Matt revved, shot a grin like a dare, and peeled off, red tail lights fading toward the bridge. The block exhaled. Iz looked up at Ryan. "Old world's noisy." "Yeah," he said, pulse finally throttling back. "But it's in our rear view." 2 weeks later, in our rear view turned into hard hats and dust. The first 3 vacant lots were cleared, mattresses hauled, weeds ripped, a rusted shopping cart hoisted out like some urban fossil. A union crew from the Bronx shook hands with neighbors hired as apprentices. Manny closed the bodega for an hour to pass out cafecitos. Kids pressed faces to the chain link, eyes wide as the excavator bit into dirt. New Dawn's site office was a rented trailer with a folding table, a topo map, and a whiteboard that read, "Clinic, housing, jobs, childcare." Iz's corner had post-its in a war map of needs: prenatal care, asthma management, mental health. "First shipment of clinic equipment arrives next week," she said, skimming the clipboard. if supply chain gods behave. They won't, Ryan said, marking a delivery schedule. Let's build for that. At lunch, Jay rolled up with Leo on his shoulders, both wearing plastic helmets 3 sizes too big. Had to show the kid where his inhaler's tax dollars are going, Jay joked. Listen, Speedy, me and a couple guys from maintenance can take nights patching potholes on 143rd if you cover materials. Could make getting to the clinic less of an obstacle course. Done, Ryan said. Submit an estimate to the council. We vote at Wednesday's meeting. That night, as the sun threw copper on scaffold poles, a cherry-red streak swung around the corner again. Ferrari. Matt. This time he didn't stay in the car. He stepped onto the dirt in white common projects like he was touring a safari. Had to see the miracle, he said, hands out. Look at you. Habitat for Humanity with better branding. Workers glanced over. Jay's mouth flattened. Iz folded her arms, patient as a triage nurse at 3 a.m. Matt toe-tapped a pile of rebar. Cute. You know what else is cute? Permits, environmental impact statements, fire code, labor audits. Inspectors love a story until they don't. I brought you a gift. He pulled an envelope from his jacket and flicked it to Ryan. From Langridge Development. They bought the lot next door. Mixed use, 27 floors. They're filing an injunction to pause any construction that impedes access to their site. I told them you'd be reasonable. Ryan read the letter. Legalese dripping like oil. Iz read over his shoulder, lips narrowing. We're not impeding, Ryan said. We're improving, and our council's already looped in. Buddy, your counsel is probably a guy with a WeWork and a latte card, Matt said. This is a machine. You don't slow a machine. You feed it or you get mulched. Iz stepped forward. You done? Matt blinked. Excuse me? You're bleeding negativity all over my site, she said. We've got people scheduled for blood pressure screenings at the pop-up on Saturday. You can leave or roll up your sleeves. The crew laughed. Even the crane operator cracked a grin. Ryan took the envelope, slid it into a folder labeled Risk, and met Matt's gaze. We're not moving. If Langridge wants to talk, they can do it at the council meeting, or in court. Matt studied him like a man considering a chess clock. You really changed, he said quietly, more observation than jab. Then the mask was back. Pity. Aurelia's oysters were perfect. He turned, crunching gravel, and slid into the car. The Ferrari fishtailed and disappeared, leaving the smell of burnt rubber and something else. Old life. Cooling. Ryan exhaled. The site hummed back to work. Think he's bluffing? Jay asked. No, Ryan said. I think he's warning. Iz bumped his shoulder. Then we plan. We get the legal clinic up sooner. We make friends with the fire inspector. And we cut the ribbon on time, because diabetics and asthmatics aren't going to wait for Langridge's renderings. Ryan smiled. Yes, ma'am. They stood on the trailer steps, looking out at the math of a dream. Lines on paper turning into beams, beams into rooms, rooms into lives. The sun slid behind the skyline, throwing long shadows that looked like tomorrow. A siren wailed somewhere south. A breeze carried the smell of hot pretzels from a street cart. A text buzzed in Ryan's pocket, from an unknown number. You picked your side. So did I. Watch your next inspection. No name, just a link to a calendar entry. Daub inspection, Thursday, 9 a.m. Iz read it, then met his eyes. Okay, she said. Round 3. Round 3, Ryan echoed, flipping the whiteboard to a new list. Inspection plan. He uncapped a marker. And across town, in a glass tower, someone else uncapped a pen. Hook first. If a city can break you with a clipboard, It can also crown you with one. The email hit like a gavel. Department of Buildings Inspection. Thursday, 9:00 a.m. No wiggle room, no smiley face. Ryan, Iz, and Jay turned the site trailer into mission control. The whiteboard filled with boxes and arrows, egress paths, temporary fencing, dust control, fire extinguishers every 75 feet. MSDS binder updated. OSHA toolbox talk at 8 sharp. Sprinkler lines are capped and pressure tested, Jay reported, flipping through a binder he'd tabbed like a college kid cramming finals. Temporary lightings at code. Guardrails on every open edge. No one steps on that deck without a harness. Iz pinned fresh posters by the gate. Free BP and asthma screenings. Saturday. If an inspector asks what this place is for, she said, I want the answer stapled to their soul. They pre-walked the site at dusk. Manny from the bodega dropped off a tray of breakfast sandwiches for the morning nerves. Mrs. Hart from the PTA brought coffee and insisted on practicing the evacuation route like it was a church drill. Kids pressed their faces to the fence while Ryan explained why hard hats make your hair look weird, but save your skull. At 8:59, a Silver City Prius rolled to the curb. Out stepped an inspector in steel-toe boots and a Yankees cap pulled low. No name, no small talk. He clicked his tablet awake. Behind him, like a bad omen, a black Escalade idled. A man in a charcoal suit leaned on the hood reading a legal folder, a Langridge pin winking at his lapel. Morning, the inspector said, voice clipped. Full walk, no shortcuts. You, walk with me. He pointed to Ryan, Jay, and the site's super. Iz raised a hand. Clinic lead, she said. Mind if I tag along? He shrugged. Stay clear of live work. They moved like a slow tide through steel and sawdust. The inspector checked rebar ties with gloved fingers, peered down shafts, measured stair risers, tugged at guardrails like he wanted them to fight back. He stopped at a stack of sheetrock leaning against a temporary wall. Angle's wrong, he said. Stack that way, and an aftershock puts it on a kid. Jay snapped to his crew. Fix it. Now. 4 hard hats swarmed the pile, resetting the stack with chocks like a demo team on TV. At the second-floor deck, the inspector knelt by a junction box. He lifted a lid, sniffed, and frowned. Who signed off on low-voltage cover plates? Subcontractor, the super said. All labeled. Label this. He took a photo, then moved on. The Langridge lawyer shadowed from just outside the caution tape, making calls with the casual menace of a weatherman predicting rain on somebody else's parade. Ryan forced his eyes back to the checklist. Keep your lane. Keep your breath. They reached the trailer. The inspector flipped through the binders, permits, insurance, safety trainings, daily logs. He paused at the last tab. Letters of support. Dozens. Tenant council, PTA, the pastor from St. Luke's. A handwritten note from a little boy named Leo with 2 crooked inhalers drawn at the bottom. The inspector's face didn't change, but his thumb lingered on the paper. He put the binder down with care and looked at Ryan. You got an anonymous complaint, he said. Said this site's blocking access for the property next door. Said you're operating without proper dust mitigation. Said your superintendent was seen drinking on site. Ryan didn't look at the Escalade. We've got a direct access agreement filed, he said, sliding a stamped copy across the table. We run 2 water misters every shift. Logs are here, and if anyone's drinking on my site, they're fired before the cap hits the can. The inspector took the papers. Misters? Jay pointed to 2 squat machines misting a fine halo over a cutting station. Keep silica down, he said. My guy's lungs aren't negotiable. The inspector stared at him a beat too long, then nodded once. He turned to Iz. "You running a hospital?" "A clinic," she said. "Preventive care, urgent triage, mental health. Free screenings this weekend. We catch asthma before the ER bills hit $2,000, and a family chooses between inhalers and rent." The inspector's mouth twitched, almost a smile or maybe a cramp. He clicked a few boxes on his tablet, then closed the case with a snap that sounded like a sentence. "Here's the deal," he said. "You've got minor corrections. Anchor that temporary ladder, flip those sheetrock stacks everywhere, swap 3 cover plates. You fail any of that, I can shut you down. You pass, you get a temporary okay to pour and proceed to framing. I'll be back Monday." The Escalade door opened. The Langridge lawyer stepped forward. "With respect, Inspector, our client—" "With respect," the inspector cut in, not looking his way. "I'm speaking." Silence fell like a dropped beam. The lawyer tucked his pin into his jacket and retreated. The inspector turned to Ryan again. "You clean your mess. You keep your men safe. You keep that mister on. And if anyone pressures you to cut corners, you put it in writing and send it to my office. We're not in the business of getting people hurt." Ryan felt something loosen between his ribs. "Yes, sir." The inspector tapped his tablet. "Corrections by end of day. I'll spot check." He left as quietly as he'd come. The Escalade slid away without a squeal. Jay whooped. The crew echoed, a chorus over steel and dust. Iz didn't cheer. She leaned into Ryan and let out a breath she'd been holding for a week. "That," she said, "was a heartbeat." By 5, the corrections were done and photographed. Manny brought a cake with New Dawn Past, kind of scrawled in blue frosting. People laughed, then lined up for slices on paper plates. Kids drew cranes in chalk on the sidewalk. Mrs. Hart organized Saturday's screening volunteers like a general. Just before sunset, Ryan's phone buzzed again. A number he hadn't seen since the day his world collapsed. Dad. He stared at the screen, thumb hovering, pulse rabbiting. He hadn't called in months. Not after the cutoff, not after the bike, not after the first time he'd felt useful. He swallowed and answered. "Ryan," Jonathan Carter said, voice thinner than Ryan remembered, and somehow heavier. "If you can, come by my office tomorrow morning. Alone." Ryan glanced at Iz. She raised an eyebrow. He nodded, put the phone on speaker. "Why?" he asked, the word rough. A pause. On the other end, the hum of a downtown floor, or maybe just memory. "Because your 6 months are up," Jonathan said quietly. "And because I think it's time you hear the whole story." The line clicked dead. Iz squeezed Ryan's hand. The sight lights blinked on, flooding steel bones with gold. "Round 4, she said. "Round 4, he echoed, staring toward a skyline he used to think he owned and now only wanted to serve. Tomorrow would bring an elevator to a glass office and a father with a folder full of plans. But tonight, the block was theirs. The air tasted like sugar and sawdust, and the sound under everything was the steady rhythm of work that mattered. If some endings roar, the ones that matter arrive like a door clicking shut. Ryan rode the elevator to the top of Carter Tower with dust still in his cuffs. The receptionist looked surprised. The corner office looked the same. Shirtboard skyline, glass like a mirror that told you what you already thought you were. Jonathan Carter stood by the window, older than his suits and softer than his legends. "Thanks for coming," Jonathan said. No lawyer, no board, just a leather folder on the desk. Ryan stayed standing. "You said the whole story." Jonathan nodded, throat tight. That old man at Stone and Salt? The one you laughed at with your friends? He touched his chest. Me. Makeup, thrift store suit. I needed to know if the boy I raised was still in there. I hated what I saw, and I hated what I let you become. Ryan's jaw clenched. The memory still burned. So you cut me off. I tore the golden net, Jonathan said, not to watch you fall, to make room for a spine. He opened the folder. Renderings, budgets, a timeline stamped New Dawn. I didn't freeze your inheritance. I moved it. A trust. Seed money for a community engine. Housing, job training, childcare. A clinic that keeps people out of the ER. I found a partner, Ethan Monroe. You met him once at a gala you can't remember. He helped me design the bones, but we needed a heart I couldn't buy. He slid the folder across. We need you to lead it. Ryan blinked. It wasn't a job offer. It was a draft notice from his better self. He glanced at the plans. Wood shops, coding labs, daycare with a mural wall. Iz's clinic at the center like a bright lung. I don't want the penthouse, Ryan said. I don't want the old life. He swallowed. I do want this, but on 2 conditions. Jonathan managed a broken smile. My son negotiating, go on. First, the flagship doesn't open downtown, Ryan said. It opens in South Line, on the same blocks that took me in when I had nothing. We hire from the neighborhood first. Ownership shares for tenants. No ribbon cutting without them holding the scissors. And the second? I don't do this alone. Dr. Rivera, co-leads. Clinical decisions are hers. If we're building health, we follow the healer. Jonathan exhaled, something like relief and penance at once. Done. Both. The man who once measured quarters by profit stepped around the desk and hugged his son like he was returning a lost passport to a country he'd been exiled from. I'm proud of you, he said into Ryan's shoulder, voice cracking. Not for surviving me, for becoming you. That night, Ryan told Iz everything on the clinic stoop. Trusts, plans, conditions. She listened with her eyes on the scaffolding where teenagers had spray-painted a sunrise. So, she said, a smile sneaking in, we go legit. We go bigger, Ryan said, but only if you say yes. She didn't make a speech. She held out her hand. Partner. News moves fast in a city that lives on rumor and coffee. Langridge's lawyer showed up once with a temporary injunction. The judge tossed it after a PTA line snaked around the courthouse, and a dozen tenants testified between double shifts. Volunteers showed before dawn, hauling planters into a new courtyard. The first apartments opened. Manny hung a banner that read, "Welcome home," in letters wide enough to see from the train. New Dawn's ground floor hummed. A fabrication lab cutting cabinet fronts with the precision of a surgeon. A culinary program whipping up hot lunches that tasted like Sundays. A childcare room where toddlers built towers and learned that knocking them down is only fun if you help rebuild. Iz ran the clinic like a lighthouse. Blood pressure screenings, inhalers before ambulances, group therapy in a circle of chairs that didn't squeak. Mrs. Hart scheduled wellness nights. Jay taught fall protection to new hires with the patience of a favorite uncle. The paychecks were union rates. The rules were posted and enforced. On a Tuesday in late fall, a thin man with a too-clean haircut hovered at the gate. Ryan recognized the posture before the face. Stuck-up courage trying to pass for swagger. Matt, Ryan said softly. Matt's eyes were swimming. I lost everything, he blurted. Crypto, gambling, leases I couldn't read. The guys, nobody picks up. I heard about this place. I know I don't deserve... Ryan put a hand on his shoulder. The circle you draw around yourself is the only one you control. You start like everyone, he said. Orientation at 9. Pay starts Friday. The rest is on you. Matt stared, then nodded so hard it looked like apology. Iz met him inside with a clipboard and a cup of soup. Small mercies, first bricks. Months later, the garden between the buildings overflowed with tomatoes and chalk drawings. Jonathan and Ethan sat on a bench. Two old men who'd made their money on deals and now measured time in school drop-offs and rec center sign-ups. A little girl barreled up the path. Brown curls, knees grass-stained. "Grandpa!" she squealed, launching into Jonathan's arms. Ryan followed, Iz behind him with a stethoscope slung like a lanyard and a smile that could stop a riot. The girl tugged Jonathan's tie. "Story?" Jonathan glanced at the courtyard. The families unloading groceries, the apprentices clocking out, the clinic door swinging open on another saved breath. He cleared his throat. "Once there was a man who thought wealth lived in a vault," he said, tapping the child's nose. "Then he learned it lives in people." They watched a new resident walk through the gate, lost and hopeful at the same time. A volunteer met him with coffee and a map. The volunteer had once arrived shaking, too. Ryan took Iz's hand. The sun slid behind the towers, leaving the lights of their buildings to do what they were built for. He remembered the first night on a bench with a dead phone and a cold suit. He remembered the inspector's steady voice, Manny's sandwiches, Mrs. Hart's clipboard, Leo's ragged breath turning smooth. He remembered a father's hardest love. You can own a skyline, he thought, and still never see a sunrise. Or you can build one and share it. "Ready?" Iz asked. "For tomorrow?" he said. "For all of it." He squeezed her fingers. "Yeah," he said, looking at the glow of new dawn. "Let's keep putting down bricks."